So that way, folks that aren't here this evening can take advantage of the knowledge that will be shared. So good evening, I'm Aisling Zaccarelli. I know most of you. I am the Assistant Director for Science and Health in the Matthews Center for Career Development. I work with pre-health students in supporting Dr. Mamoon, the pre-health director. Thank you, Dr. Mamoon, for joining us this evening. So glad you will be able to chime in and provide extra guidance. And I'm also doing this presentation this evening with Dr. Mike Thomason. Mike, I'll let you introduce yourself since some of the students may not know you already.
Hi all, I'm Mike Thomason, class of 74 from way back. I was 40 years general surgery, trauma, critical care, acute care surgery down at Carolina's Medical Center in Charlotte. That was my career, training surgery residents and working with a wonderful faculty and teammates. I retired about 5 years ago. I've been working with Dr. Mamoon in the pre-healthcare program since a little before that time, doing mock interviews and some symposia and other things and helping out for events like this. So happy to be here. Oh, and also I'm the chairman of the Council of Alumni Healthcare Professionals. We call it CAP, and it's our attempt to connect grads from healthcare in Davidson. There are about 2,000 over the last 40 years with those of you that are applying to various professional schools, medical school, veterinary school, PA, whatever it may be, dentistry, and trying to make that connection one-on-one. And we're getting that started and off the ground. And my one ask of you is hopefully you're all on Davidson Connect. And if you haven't joined what's called the Healthcare Professionals Network group, go on Davidson Connect on the left-hand column, click on groups, type in healthcare and you'll find it. We've got a couple hundred people that are on that so far, and we hope to use that as our connector going forward when we find individuals looking for folks either geographically or by specialty or whatever as we keep growing that. So I would ask that you do that, cost you nothing as you get the opportunity. Thanks, I'm glad to be here.
Okay, great. And with that, we're going to get started. So this program tonight is intended to be entirely helpful to all of you. So if you have questions as we're going through, please just jump in and ask them. You don't have to wait to the end. We do have a lot of content we're going to cover until about 8 o'clock. So 25 minutes or 24. And then at 8 o'clock, I've asked a few alumni to join the call to talk about their interview experiences and what they wish they had known when they were in your shoes. Okay. All right. So that'll be from 8 to 8:30 and we'll conclude at 8:30. All right. So the first, let's see here. So tonight, this is what we plan to cover. Okay. We're going to give you some tips to knock it out of the park. We're going to talk about the power of first impressions. We're going to understand all the experiences that you have had up until this point have yielded transferable skills and knowledge and how you'll want to showcase that in your interview. We want you to be confident, but also kind of go into your interviews knowing the different types and kind of tips for each of them and the etiquette behind interviewing just in general. Okay. All right. So here's the deal. The whole point of the interview, whether it be med school, vet school, dental, PA, they're trying to see if you are who you say you are, right? They have your application. They liked it. They're inviting you. They've sent you the secondaries. They've liked it. They want to see if the person that shows up on the screen is indeed the person that has submitted all of this documentation and essays up until this point. And so it's their chance to get to know you and see if your experiences, if you have the kind of qualifications, the experience, the competencies that they're looking for, and that you will be a fit for their program. Okay. They also want to know your reasons for applying. Yes, you can have, there's all sorts of services these days to help write applications. And so this is the opportunity now for them in an interview for them to vet out, are you who you say you are? They're also trying to assess your potential contributions. Are you going to be able to hack the med school or the vet school curriculum? Are you going to not only just hack it, but are you going to do well in it? Are you going to be a good community member in the program, a good team player? Are you going to ultimately be a good clinician? And so they're assessing all of those things and ultimately your readiness at this moment in time to be enrolled in the program next summer, next fall. Okay, so that's the lens. And so sometimes just helpful to remember that piece. So in terms of like how to knock it out of the park, some tips that I typically go to share with students, and again, Dr. Mamoon, Dr. Thomason, please jump in here, but really advise students to know the program that they're interviewing with. Okay, so each program prides itself on its distinctive competency. What are they doing that's different than other med schools or vet schools or dental schools? Okay, so know the program itself and know how they are different and know what that program's looking for. You know, mentioning that you're really into research to a program like East Carolina, it's not going to fly, right? They're not a research heavy program. But you know, conversely, there are other assets, different experiences that you have that programs are indeed looking for. So knowing that, how do you know that? Well, you can, of course, read all over their websites, but sometimes it's not really written on their website. And so we would encourage you to strongly encourage you to network with alumni that are in that program, that have come out of that program. They know that program inside and out, and they know the culture of the program. And that's culture is just something that kind of you need to absorb. And so would definitely strongly recommend that you do that. If you have any issues or problems finding alumni, I have a very quick and easy tool that I can show you. Just come see me, or Dr. Mamoon, I'm sure she knows it too. The other thing you could do is reach out to current students. You know, that we're all on LinkedIn these days. It's not too hard to find people that are enrolled in that program, and you know, standard email addresses exist at every college and university. So, you know, first letter, last name. So we would encourage you to also connect with current students if we don't have alumni connections there. The other thing to know is that, of course, you've already submitted all of this documentation, right? Your application, your supplementary essays. You have a lot that you've already submitted, but don't assume that your interviewer is extraordinarily well versed on all of that. We would hope that they would be, but they aren't always. Sometimes they bring in people that haven't seen the application to get a fresh read, or whoever was supposed to do it was out sick, so they're having someone else step in. So you want to, you don't worry about being duplicative or redundant. You do want to kind of reference things. And I always say, like, think about the things that you're most proud of in your past up until this point, and make sure that you reference those things in your interview, in those early questions. Okay, you also will want to make sure you have specific questions for that particular program ready to go in your pocket, so that you're not having to come up with them on the fly. Okay, and then obviously all the goodies of having a good attitude, maintaining great eye contact, making sure that you are very careful with your nonverbal communication. We're going to go over some of that. But bottom line, guys, practice, practice, practice. You can practice with me. You can practice with Dr. Mamoon. You can practice with Dr. Thomason. We have a fairly deep bench of alumni to practice with. Okay, and that is so important, because you're going to get feedback and you're going to get better, and then you're going to do it again, and you're going to get more feedback, and you're going to get even better. And so by the time you get to your actual big day, you are going to be so good at interviewing, and that's what we want. Anything to add here? Nope. Okay, let's keep going. This is an important one. Researchers have found that most people have a first impression within 7 seconds. And actually, there's more recent research that say it's within a thousandth of a second. Okay, so no pressure. But what that does is it sets up what's called an angel or halo effect. Okay, so if you open with a strong positive, that strong positive often carries through the rest of the interview, and your responses will be viewed positively as opposed to critically. So we really want you to open in a strong, confident way. Okay. All right. Now, in terms of in-person stuff, I just want to touch base, because this is like a little thing, but can turn into a very big thing, especially since, well, I'll just say that for in-person interviews, and I understand that most interviews are now virtual, but there are going to be some programs that will want you to come in person. And so you don't want to be trying to figure out the location or the building or the room that day or that morning or whatever it is. You always want to do a dry run, okay? Like the night before or hours before, so that you know exactly where you're supposed to be. You want to make sure you bring pen and paper and that you have fuel for the day. This might seem silly, but some of these interviews, vet and med school, can go all day. And you'll want to just have those protein bars and a water bottle in your bag ready to go. Okay. Firm handshake, smile, lots of eye contact. And again, emphasizing these questions about the program, but really be yourself. That's the other thing that practice will give you, because a lot of you, I've noticed when you come into an interview, practice a mock interview, you get stressed out and that we kind of lose your personality and your confidence and all of that. And so the more you can practice, the more you can be at ease with yourself. And that's what we really want to showcase in these interviews, because you have gotten to this point of them inviting you to an interview because you are extremely interesting to them and they are considering you for a seat in their program. Okay. Now, this is like another little kind of nitpicky thing, but I really can't emphasize this one enough, which is practice with the technology. Like, I know you feel like, oh, I know Zoom. Just go ahead and click that link that they give you. Make sure it works on your computer. You don't need another update or Microsoft Teams or whatever it might be. Sometimes that, with Microsoft Teams, you might need to download it again. You just don't want to be futzing with that the morning of, okay? The other thing is you'll want to make sure that you have a space without distractions. So if you are going to be using your dorm room or a shared living space, make sure that the people you live with know and put up signs and reminders so that even for delivery people, okay, because that can really throw you off your game. We do have rooms in the Matthews Center for those that are on campus that you can rent or reserve, okay? And there's a barcode at our front desk for how to do that. And I know the library has rooms as well. So you'll want to double check your Zoom name. And this has come up with a few mock interviews because I've had some silly names appear of like, well, I don't need to tell you what they are, but they're just silly. So you want to make sure your Zoom name matches your legal name and the name that's on your application and your background. You'll see that Dr. Mamoon and I are both using Davidson College backgrounds. Some programs don't want you to identify your college. And so I would just caution you with that. Just make sure you can always just blur your background. That works really well. I have put together a professional etiquette one pager for connecting virtually. It's a tips document, but the bottom line for that is that you really want to have your light source coming at your face. Now, I'm in a room that has automatic lights and the lights just went off and I can't walk across the room to go turn it on right now. So this was a poor choice of room for me, but you would want to make sure that you have lights that stay on just for the duration of your interview, okay? And don't have a window behind you or at one side of you. You always want that light source coming at your face. You want to connect at least 5 minutes early, no more than 8, okay? And you want to view yourself. How do you look on the screen? Do you need to adjust anything, okay? You definitely want to dress for success, even though it's virtual. So of course it can be from the waist up. You'll want to have that camera angle coming straight at your face or slightly down. Again, lighting. Turn off all phone and computer notifications, okay? So that nothing is going to kind of get in your way. All right, cranking through here. First impressions in terms. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Aisling, I'm sure you may be talking about it later on, but a word about camera angle. Do put some books under your laptop so that the camera is flush with your face. So what I'm saying, and you probably do this already. So going from this to this.
Yes.
Okay. So do keep that in mind.
Yes.
That way you'll be able to look directly at the camera instead of looking down at it.
The Matthews Center has laptop stands and we keep them in our printer cabinet. Okay. And we also have ring lights that you can attach to your screen, right behind your camera so that it's coming right at your face. So just know that those are great things, but definitely the camera angle is super important. All right. And that professional etiquette tips document is on handshake under resources interview. Okay. First impressions for attire. Really do want to go with business dress here. Okay. Now, if you don't have business dress, you could do business casual, but we do recommend dressing up for these interviews. This is an opportunity, and you want to look your absolute best. I would definitely recommend that you really kind of do a dark suit with a light shirt or some kind of tailored dress. Go easy with the jewelry, makeup. That you have, if you are going in person, that you have closed-toe shoes that are nice, okay? If you are wondering where I got all these specifics, it's from the Harvard Interviewing Guide. This is what they recommend for Harvard students, and I wholeheartedly agree. If you are going in person, definitely stay away from strong scents. We don't need any negative bias, okay? So aftershave, perfume, no fun ties. That's another thing that is definitely recommended against. And that if you need assistance with clothing, Lulabelle's on campus has clothing rentals, okay? And so you should take advantage of that when they do shoes and all of it. Okay, moving on. There are a lot of nonverbal communication signals that we can send off. And so I just, you can scan this, but you may not have even thought of some of these. But I have noticed in doing mock interviews that some students blink a lot, and that can be really distracting. Or they can be like looking up at the ceiling while they're thinking and starting to talk that way. You really want to be looking directly at that camera and connecting with the interviewer, okay? So just be mindful of all these nonverbals, even posture. Like leaning in shows a level of engagement. Sitting back shows a level of distance, right? Like, so you want to have all of these things kind of coming together. You also, when we're stressed, our face can do some weird things, okay? The facial muscles can get stiff and can start like moving in an awkward way. If this is something that you can relate to, I have a tip for you. It's very simple. It's a breathing tip, and I would actually recommend it to all students, but it's basically just exhaling 3 times as long as your inhale. And you can do this, and nobody can see that you're doing it, but it is a way of calming your body down right as the interview is starting, okay? Because as you guys have all studied with bio, no animal in fight or flight is going to be doing that kind of breath, okay? So that simple breathing technique, it's gotten me over the hump of public speaking, and I would just like to pass that on to you. Okay, so in the Matthews Center, we talk a lot about transferable skills, and whether you've had retail opportunities or have worked in a vet or medical clinic, or you have done research at some renowned research institution, there are fabulous transferable skills that have come out of all of those things. And they're important because you're going to bring those with you to your program, okay? And so to the extent that we can get you thinking about what your skills are and what you're bringing, it would be great to be able to bake those in. Why? Because the AAMC, and I get this is more relevant for med school candidates, but for my vet school friends, these core competencies do cross over to vet school as well, right, Dr. Mamoon? But these are the core competencies that the AAMC has identified that is essential for each incoming med student, okay? And so I really want you to be thinking about, you should just know these. Like, I know you can memorize complicated physics formulas, know these AAMC competencies, okay? Be thinking about them, because why? When you're answering your questions in an interview, you can, if you have these in mind, you'll be bringing aspects of this into your answer, and that's what we want, okay? All right, so in terms of translating your experiences, you've done a lot, right? And we don't want to refer to any of the things that you've done kind of in a casual or general way. We definitely, whenever you get asked a question, be specific, tie it right back to a specific incident or specific research experience or specific clinic experience. You really do want to, or even like if you're a part of an eating house or a fraternity, wherever you have had leadership, wherever you can kind of go and take a concrete, detailed example and bring it into your response, that will strengthen your response tremendously. Okay. And again, this is just another just important tip. Whatever you're most proud of, the interviewer should not be finding out about at the very end of the interview. You want to have those things. I always joke about like the fact that I was a White House fellow, right? I make sure in every interview it comes out in the first minute because I'm very proud of it, right? So think about what you're really proud of. What have you done that and you may think, oh, well, they already have that in my file. But again, remember, not everyone has read your file and is coming into the interview with all of that knowledge in their head. Okay. And I know we only have 6 minutes here, so I'm just going to quickly go through, but there are lots of different types of interview questions. Just rest assured that there aren't knowledge questions based on with these upcoming interviews. They're not going to be sussing out like if you really do know organic chemistry or not. It's going to be mostly around like who you are, why you want to be accepted into this program, institutional alignment, like why us versus someone else, and like how you are going to handle not only the curriculum, but like the challenges of being a professional in that field. Okay. So that's really what they're getting at with all of these behavioral questions. And we're going to talk about what those are. There are different types of interviews. So you can imagine a traditional interview is where you're asked a question, a fairly straightforward question, strengths and weaknesses, or, why do you want to be a veterinarian, or why do you want to be a doctor, right? Traditional classic questions where they ask and you respond. And you typically have like one interviewer, or maybe you might have a group of interviewers. You could also have what's called a mini multiple interview, which is lots of short, small interviews. And you'll go from one interview to another interview with a different interviewer, to another one, to another one, to another one. Why do they do this? To eliminate interviewer bias, which is a thing, okay? So a lot of programs are pivoting to these MMI style types of interviews. And there's a way to do those, and we're going to talk about that. And then there's some programs, and Wake is one of them, have asynchronous interviews where there's no interviewer at the other end. You just get a series of prompts on the screen, okay? And you have to know how to handle that. At least some programs do that as a first round. And then if you do well on that, as scored by AI generally, then you would move on. Okay, so you can fully expect, tell me about yourself. Okay, that's a classic opening question, and that we hear of this being referred to as an elevator pitch. Okay, this is what, like if someone says, tell me about yourself, this should be something that just comes right out of your mouth and flows right out. And it tells kind of a short summary of who you are, who you want to be, and some key experiences you've had. Okay. And you guys really do want to practice this, so it's just comes right out naturally. The other question that you can fully expect is, why do you want to come here? Okay, and we've talked about this. Do your homework, the website, alumni, current students, alignment of mission. They be authentic but compelling, but also like really specific. I didn't dedicate a slide to it, but it's obvious that they're going to say, why do you want to be a doctor? Why do you want to be a veterinarian? Okay, you need to have that like a really strong response in your pocket, ready to go. Now, I'm not suggesting you should sound rehearsed. I don't want you to write something out, memorize it, and go right into it. Okay. Instead, it would be important to, and actually, I'm going to make Dr. Mamoon, I'm going to make you the co-host so that you can admit our guests, okay, at the right time. So that's something that you can expect. Now, behavioral questions, these are all around like, what would you do in a particular situation? Why are they asking these? Because they want to see your past experience is the best predictor of future performance, okay? So they want to know, how did you handle a conflict in the past? Because you're probably going to have a conflict in med school or in the future, okay? Or tell me about a time you made a mistake. Why? Because you'll likely make a mistake. They want to know, how did you handle it before? What did you learn? And how are you going to handle it in the future? Okay, so have answers to kind of classic behavioral questions in your pocket. I recommend this strategy called the STAR approach, which is kind of, you can read it here, but you want to provide a detailed context of the situation. Then you want to describe the challenge and what needed to be done, the action you took, and the results you got. And I would recommend a T at the end of that, a start, which is tie it back to your career as a physician or veterinarian. Okay, those things are important. All right, here's some samples, and I'm going to be sending around the slides so you can read these later, but these are for those that haven't seen MMI questions before. Just wanted you to see what they look like. They can take the shape of pro-con arguments. You'll need to argue both sides. We do also have some MMI tips here. In the interest of time, I will let you read those later. I did want to mention that we've talked about different styles of interviews. There can often be, if you're in person, like a team interview to see how you do on a team and like what role do you assume. And of course, everyone that's going for this typically is going for the role of leader, but okay, if you're not the leader, how do you fit? And so there's some tips with that. And then I did want to mention thank you notes. Now this can be tricky because you may not have their email addresses, but to the extent that you can figure it out, this would be great to do, okay? And you want to do it quickly and you want to be specific and brief. It does not need to be, it should not be long. It should just really be short and sweet and thank them for their time and reiterate your strong interest in their particular program. Just a quick word about red flags. These are things that we would strongly avoid that you not do. So we would want you to provide concrete examples, okay? We'd want you to stay away from glib or superficial ones. Try not to use we, try to always speak about I. This is an interview of you, not maybe your team or anything else. Of course, you want to avoid inaccurate or inappropriate information. And I put inflammatory language here. And the reason for that one is because I just recently did an MMI panel and one of the students used inflammatory language in her response. What do I mean by that? She just used extreme language. We were talking about a pro-con argument, and she was talking about a policy that is a very general, good, a fair policy. And she was talking about it as predatory and entrapment and all of this stuff. And I thought, this is crazy. This is not at all where this question was going. So you need to really kind of check that at the door and avoid that. Okay. There is an interview guide on Handshake. And with that, I know we're at 8:01. I really ran through that quickly, but I do want to get to our guests, make sure that they have time to share their experiences. And I see Haley is here. So and Tariq is here. Fabulous. And then is Maya here yet?
I have not seen Maya yet.
Great.
I don't think she's here yet.
Great. I know, Haley, you were coming from anatomy. So Haley Hulk.
Where is Haley?
I live there now.
Oh, there she is. Hey, Haley, good to see you.
So good to see you guys. Tariq, it's so good to see you. So Haley, we'll start with you. You are, oops, I'm sorry. You are at Wake Forest. You are in your first year. Can you hear me?
I'm at UT Southwestern.
UT Southwestern. Oh, why did I think you were at Wake? I'm so sorry. Okay.
No worries.
Southwestern. Yeah. Okay. And you are in your first year. You graduated in 22 as a chem major. Okay. Yes. And I had asked you a series of questions, which I can remind you of if you, but I'll zip up now.
Yeah.
Share your thoughts.
Yeah, so I guess the first thing you asked me was just to kind of let everyone know where I interviewed in terms of kind of like getting an idea of all the different kind of questions that I got. So I interviewed at quite a few places. I interviewed at big ones in Texas, so like UT Southwestern, Baylor, UT, SA, and then the campus in Galveston. I also did interviews at Yale, Harvard, NYU, WashU, U Chicago, Stanford, and Northwestern. So I feel like I got a pretty good gist of very different types of interview questions, from like MMI type styles to just like your classic interviews. They were definitely a good mix of interviewers who like knew a lot about you going in and have like fully read your file versus interviewers that were very blind, and it was just a very get to know you type of situation. But the absolute number one question that I got from everybody at the get-go was, tell me about yourself. And so I kind of used that as a way to like set a little plate of basically my experiences and things that like I thought were important and that I wanted to talk about. So obviously, yes, I began with like, from Texas, from San Antonio. I kind of always like to start it off with a joke, only because I don't know, I think it makes me feel a little bit lighter when I'm talking to a bunch of interviewers. But then also just giving like them the highlights of things that they can then like ask me follow-up questions about later. Oh, sorry, that was my alarm to get out of anatomy lab. So that was kind of what I did as like a sampling to just kind of let them know the experiences that I was really passionate about. And so that tended to like revolve around lab, the work that I did during my gap year, and then also like all the tutoring that I had done throughout college, because those were like my main three things that like I was really passionate about. And so I wanted to be sure that those were things that I conveyed to whoever was interviewing me. And so that was kind of like the first question that really set the groundwork for a lot of things. Also, some of the schools will let you know if your interviewer has like had an open file for you, in which case they've totally read your personal statement already. They've read your supplemental essays, in which case like don't rehash what you wrote in your personal statement, which you can do if they haven't like read about you before. And so if you want to like give them an idea of who you are based on what you wrote in your personal statement, that's great for somebody who maybe haven't read your application, but make sure you're using that like first question wisely, just because you only have so much time with them. And then also just kind of every time I got a lot of questions about like conflicts or things that I was able to work with well in teams. And so just kind of be sure that you have like reasonable examples there that highlight both your strengths and your flaws. Like it's okay if you messed up and maybe didn't handle something perfectly, but just make sure when you're talking about these things to really sum up like a point or something that you learned from it that you look to then translate into med school. And so that was one thing that I always kind of made sure at the very end I could kind of point them, or at least show how like I have grown and how I would then use these skills later in med school. And then when they ask you questions about stuff that you're passionate about, and so like when they asked me about my research, or if they asked me about the social determinants of health work that I did, I always try to tie that back into something that I would love to do at the school. And so making sure you're doing a little bit of prep work on the front end to kind of learn about the programs that they have. A lot of schools at the end of the day, yes, you'll find that they're kind of very similar in what they have to offer. But if you can kind of pick out a few separate things for that particular school and then say, you know, I really saw that you guys have a really big community clinic program that I'd love to be involved with because of all the work that I've done previously. And so just kind of making it like you've actually looked into the school. I think that does a lot of nice things just for your interview in general. And then also just kind of be honest and authentic. One of my questions from UT Southwestern was how I would handle like doing really poorly on tests and being like majorly overwhelmed. And I looked at him and I was like, to be honest, I'd probably go cry. And then, you know, we'd come back and we'd study more and we'd do it again. And so just like, don't necessarily feel like you have to come up with like a very, I have it all together kind of response. As long as, you know, at the end of the day, you kind of have a way to kind of move forward with that. Sorry, I feel like that was a lot. But those are kind of the main questions that I made sure that I prepared for. Was tell me about yourself, made sure that I knew kind of a list of experiences and then how to connect it to the school that I was interviewing at. And then also making sure that I had ideas about like conflicts or how I worked in kind of a team-based situation. Those were the main ones. There are going to be some other questions that you get asked, but I feel like if you have like quality responses to some of those, you can kind of toggle them in between some of the questions that you get asked. But yeah, sorry, that was a lot. I'm also majorly hyped from anatomy lab, so I feel like I'm just talking a lot. But yeah. Also, if anybody has any questions, feel free to email me. I will put my email in the chat just in case. But yeah, cool.
That'd be great. That'd be great. Thank you, Haley. All right. And I'm sure we're going to come back to you with some questions, but Tariq, why don't you share your tips and insights and what you wish you had known?
Yeah, so I feel like Haley really hit the nail on the head with a lot of her tips. A lot of those tips, I also second and very much, what's the word I'm looking for? Support. I want you guys, everything Haley said, do it. A few things with me and what I noticed is that I'm at the Dental College of Georgia now. It's a dental school. I applied and interviewed at a few places, and what I realized for a lot of my interviews was all of them were open file. They had already read, everything about my entire application, and they were more of getting to know me questions. So, tell me about yourself, why dentistry, little questions like that, and then after that, it would be more of a conversational interview after that, and we just whatever flowed off the mind we wouldn't have. And I guess for like for over here, it's like they just want to see how personable you are. They already read your stats. They know you have a good GPA, a good MCAT, DAT, GRE, whatever else you have to take. But they know like you have the numbers to be there. So once you get an interview, it's about just showing how you are as a person. So, very similar to how Haley said, I start off with a joke when they ask me, tell me about yourself, and it just lightens the mood, and everybody's more willing to talk once they've smiled a little bit. And I think for me, I went to a lot of interview workshops like what we're having here now. I went to, whether it was dental school related, med school related, vet school related, anything and everything. I went to everything just because I have FOMO, like I have a fear of missing out on information. So really, I gained a lot of information and perspectives when I went to all of these. And I guess I knew a lot going in. And I guess what I applied the most was just having stories to tell for everything. Every question they had, I had a story to tell that, I worked on before. And when I say work on before, I thought of like, I YouTube so many interview questions, and all the ones on there, I just like jotted down some notes, like experiences I had and how they connect to the school and, what I learned from them. And again, I want to emphasize that I jotted down notes and that I didn't memorize them. So when they asked me a question, I would be like, oh yeah, I worked on that. And then when I think about the notes, it comes off in a different way versus like memorizing it, and then they can tell you memorized it. And then I guess another really big thing that I implemented from what I learned was it was just on my head. Oh, again, what Haley said, being authentic. I told them stuff that I was passionate about. I didn't tell them things that, they really like to hear this. Of course, that was in the back of my head, but I really wanted to talk about what I was passionate about. So then, because they can tell when you're passionate about something, or you're just telling them just to like, tell them that you did something. So just having that authenticity and showing that you're passionate about a few certain things, that really helps. Let me see what else I wrote. Yeah, honestly, I didn't receive that many crazy questions, even though as prepared as I was for those. So I was kind of disappointed. I wanted to show off how much I prepared for the crazy questions. But again, just like Haley said, when they asked about mistakes and weaknesses, those were the two I was most worried about. But I realized that it was just about being honest about the mistake you made or the weaknesses you have, but also saying how you worked on that or what you learned from it and how you moved on from those experiences. But sorry, that was just off the top of my head. Everything I learned from my interview experiences.
That's great. That's great. I'm sure students are going to have targeted questions for you in just a few minutes. Maya, can you share your wisdom?
Oh yeah, and I'll go ahead and put my contact information in the chat.
Thank you, Tariq.
Hi, sorry I showed up a little late. I hope I didn't miss like intros or anything. But yeah, are we just sharing tips? Is that what we're doing right now?
Tips.
Okay.
Tips, what you
Lovely.
wish you had known, how your interviews went, like what questions, if you remember, what questions you got, where did you interview, if you want to share that.
Yeah. So I go to UNC, which is on my little name thing. So I of course interviewed at UNC. I also interviewed at Duke. Oh, Wake. I forgot about Wake Forest. I interviewed at Duke, Wake Forest, ECU, EVMS, Morehouse. And then there were a couple others at the end that I just didn't go to. But it was like Wayne State and stuff like that. But yeah, so those were my interviews. Every single one of them were completely different. So just kind of be open to changes and differences and transitions, because there was not one of those interviews that I could say were just like the other. They expected different things. They asked different questions. Their like emphasis were all on different things because they're all different schools. So keep that in mind. And in terms of like some tips, especially for y'all, hopefully it's still Zoom, but Zoom interviews, I feel like are just a different kind of beast. So think about the fact that you're going to be on Zoom for hours. Like when I was doing my interviews, I was like professional head to toe. I wasn't like one of those people who like wear like some crazy pants. Always wear pants, by the way. But I was professional head to toe. And I also always had a blanket because I know my feet used to get cold. So I'd have a blanket and a little warmer next to my feet and some lip gloss and some snacks. Like you're not getting up and you don't really know when they'll give you time to get up. So I had like all the things that I wanted right next to me. Just like logistically talking about interviews, because I know like the people before me said some really good tips about like actually what to say, but also you have to think about what you need. So I had that, and I also had like Post-its that I had two sets of Post-its. One thing of Post-its that told me what I wanted to talk about, like this school was really big on service, so I should talk about these things of service. And I like stuck that on the top of my computer, and I would like mark it off when I like talked about it, so I would know what I've already talked about, but also what I want to emphasize as we go throughout the interview. And then I'd have another set of Post-its to like keep questions of things that I would want to ask later on. So those were really important for me. And I would have like Post-its like all over my computer. So those are my two main things for tips, like just more logistically speaking. And then the final thing, I kind of like wrote down some notes right before I started talking, was to practice as much as possible. I interviewed probably like to the point where my eyes are going cross-eyed. Like so many of my friends were like, all of my friends helped me, all of my, like even my parents and my aunts and like people like you who aren't even interested in medicine, they really help you because they tell you what is interesting to hear as well, and how you talk and how you interact. So just keep that in mind, like practice as much as possible and with different types of people, not just people in medical school, because they'll tell you what's good for medicine, but you need to know what's good from a person level. You don't know who you'll be talking to when you're in the interview. So
Great. All great things. And Dr. Thomason, I want to give you a chance to share some of your insights because I know you are so incredible at giving so many of our Davidson students mock interviews. So can you share some insights that you have?
So this is coming from the old guy. So mostly I've done surgery resident interviews for 40 years, but I've done medical school interviews too. And everybody's hit on the high points. And so I won't repeat too much of that, but expect different personality styles from your interviewer. And one thing I would say is don't be offended if they move on, if they cut you off and move to the next question. It was said earlier, they've got a very limited amount of time to get to know you as a human being, as a person. And they may have a specific set of questions they want to ask you. So if you're moving through something you feel is very interesting and they just move to the next question, don't get offended. The other thing is try to remember it's easy to say relax. It's not easy to do, right? It's going to be an anxiety event, but it's supposed to be a conversation, except the Wake Forest one, which is whatever that weird thing is, asynchronous, where you're just talking to a screen. But other than that, as much as you can, make it a conversation. And I think that the three that just talked to you were even making their comments tonight conversational, which is important. If you speak with your hands, that's okay. Just don't do it to the extreme. One of my problems is I talk really fast and I talk with my hands. So just be aware of your tendencies. And especially when you're anxious, sometimes pressured speech can be a challenge. I would repeat, you don't want to give scripted or rehearsed answers. It's absolutely, like Tariq said, important to have those things in your mind that you're going to respond to, but it has to be spontaneous, conversational in some way. If it comes off scripted or rehearsed, that's a real red flag for the interviewer themselves. I think it's already been said, but knowing personal anecdotes that illustrate specific events in your life or experiences that you've had that you want to highlight, positive and negative, I mean, one of the questions I ask people is, what's the worst thing that's ever happened to you? Tell me about that. What did you learn from that? And that point was made earlier. You want to have taken something from that. I think that, Haley said earlier, I cried sometimes when I have a bad problem. It's okay. You're a human being, and they recognize that. You don't want to come across like an automaton. Silence is okay as long as it's not extended silence. So if you're trying to contemplate a response, it's absolutely okay to take a moment of silence and prepare your answer and then respond. You don't necessarily, I don't think you have to ask permission to do that. I think you just need to take a pause and then respond. I think it's okay to do that. And the other thing is every interviewer, I said this earlier, but they're all very different. So the practice is really important. And I think that it's good to practice, like Maya said, with lots of people, even people you know. But frankly, it's also good to practice with people that you don't know at all. It's a very different situation than if you're with a close friend or a family member. So even if they're not in medicine, and between Dr. Mamoon and Aisling, I think we're developing a pretty good group of alums that are willing to pitch in, and their professors as well. So do as much of that as you can possibly work in to your schedule. You can't do that too much because you'll face all different kind of interviewers. Some will be the great stone face. There'll be no interpersonal, no body language, no nothing. They'll just sit there and look at you. So be prepared for that. Some interviewers think that's a technique that's helpful, and others will be more interactive, and nod and smile and do the things you might expect. But again, don't be offended by that if that's the sort of thing you get. Several people mentioned this, but the people at Vanderbilt in particular, and Aisling has some of those slides in her deck, the competency-based behavioral interviewing, CBBI, is a thing now, and mostly that focuses on integrity, ethics type questions, your resilience, your ability to kind of think on your feet, and your curiosity, your interest in learning, things that intrigue you, that you want to, that you want to explore more. So those are some of the things you might get in competency-based interview type styles. And I've said this before too, in the ethics questions, there's not a right or a wrong answer, but you need to have a response. And so I think, and I'm interested to hear what the recent students would say, but it's absolutely fine to weigh the pros and cons a little bit. If you're asked one of those complex questions, it's okay to do that. But at the end of the day, you got to make a choice, because as physicians or healthcare providers, whether you're a vet or a dentist, you're going to have to make decisions and choices. And sometimes they'll be difficult. Sometimes they'll be wrong, but you have to make a choice. So at the end of that kind of a question, don't end up saying, I can't choose, or I don't know. Make a choice. It'd be my advice to you as an interviewer. Those are the top ones that I've had.
Excellent. Excellent feedback. All right. With our last 9 minutes, because I know I promised it would end at 8:30. Students, what questions do you have for our alumni?
I have a question for alumni, if I may ask. So I was wondering that, it's really important to, learn about the culture of the school and this specific niche programs that may be present at each schools, especially because you may have a really good fit for that particular program, right? In addition to that, what are some good things to ask about, like the curriculum, pass-fail for USMLE Step 1, how students, Step 2, how students are evaluated, wellness support. What are some other good questions students could ask the schools at the end of their interview?
I think you hit on a lot of really good ones, like always ask about step preparation, what that looks like, if it's built into the curriculum. Always ask about if it's pass fail. Ask about how third year, how you're evaluated, specifically third year, because that makes a big difference when you're applying to residency. Again, me and my logistics. Ask about parking, ask about transportation, how you're expected to get to school every day. Also ask if they provide like any sort of like therapy for mental health, stuff like that. And if that's already expected and in the culture, because if they don't have that, that's also an answer for you. there was another one I was gonna say. Oh, ask if it's like if what's it called? A flip lecture. And if you're expected to be in class every day from 8 a.m. to like 5 p.m. That's what they just changed it at UNC too. Or if you can do it all online. I think those are big ones.
What's a flip lecture?
So a flip lecture is when you're expected to watch or review something before you show up to lecture, and then lecture is more of a like a talk based discussion based on whatever you were supposed to learn.
Haley, were you going to chime in on that?
Oh, I wholeheartedly agree with basically all those questions. Really basically just to get a sense of like the vibe of the school, and also how collaborative it is between the different classes, is a great way to just kind of assess how the community is like at that school. And then also just realistically asking them, you know, how competitive the environment feels like. Most schools I know nowadays will say that it's pretty collaborative. However, that's not necessarily the case everywhere. So just kind of, you know, asking. And the med students will be very honest with you in terms of how they're feeling. And then also asking about just kind of like community events that the school has. And things that they do kind of maybe beyond the med school sphere, because this can be a lot. So just kind of making sure that they, you know and support that you want to be doing other things than just being in the classroom all the time, is really helpful. And then, yeah, also if they have housing, that's kind of a nice question to ask. Some schools will have like subsidized housing, some schools don't, but you know, some of these like logistical questions can be nice to ask.
Very helpful. What about you, Tariq? Do you have something?
Yeah, for me personally, a few that I asked was I asked students and faculty why would they choose their own school, just to hear what they had to say. And then I also asked like what could their school improve. I asked what their student to faculty ratio was to see if you could, because you want less students to one faculty so you can get more one-on-one attention and hear what you could improve on a more personal level. I asked them, let's see, how do we gain a patient base here when we're in our clinical years? So when we have to start working in clinic with our patients, how do we gain them? Do we have to find our own, or are they provided, or are they passed down? So those were a few that I asked personally, just to, the students who we saw and the faculty who interviewed me.
Yeah, I would also say, sorry, go ahead, Ian.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, oh no, Ian. Sorry, not me. Go ahead, Ian.
No, you go ahead, Maya.
Okay.
We'll get to Ian.
Last thing, make sure you ask if they provide secondary resources, because B&B, Pathoma, Anki, all those things add up and they don't give you but so much on your loans. So you should ask if they provide them to you your first year. That was a big one.
Good point.
Ian.
I have 3 quick questions. One, are MMIs only like the ethical questions, or will they also be like, okay. No. 2, would going on a place like Reddit, like that was super helpful for the MCAT? Like, is there information about interviews on websites like that?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
And it's dynamic. Yes.
And
yeah,
then
I actually learned from Reddit when I was going to get into medical school before I even got into medical school.
Serious?
Wait, I just thought of a 4th question. Okay, 3, will the Career Center be open next Friday because it's fall break?
Yes, the Career Center is open. I am out of the office in the afternoon. So
okay, but like rooms will be available for
yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Great.
And feel free to go to the Center for Teaching and Learning. They've got spaces also.
Yeah.
Okay. And then like timeline for hearing back about interviews. Like I've had some people tell me that like they hear back mostly after Christmas, or like, is it just like whenever?
I mean, people are getting interviews now. It can run all the way through until February. I think the last one I heard of was like, I want to say March, early March. Yep. So it can really run the gamut.
They're still doing the early decision pool. it seems like, and UNC apparently I just found out last weekend that they haven't started meeting as an admissions committee yet. So yeah. So if you haven't heard back
it
yet,
really
please
varies.
don't
It
panic.
also depends on the year, because I know UNC's has actually changed because their curriculum changed. So even if you hear something from that happened last year, that may be different the following year.
That's a good point.
I think we wanted to ask our 3 recent alums about sending thank you notes or thank you emails or anything. Is that something you did specifically? Or do you feel it was worthwhile, or hard to know, I guess, but did you all do that or not when you had interviews?
I did it for every single interview and interviewee I had. And when I wrote back, or when I sent them like the email, I thanked them for their time and like always added like something specific that we talked about. So then, you know,
Great advice. And you did it by email, right? Not by, used to back in the day, it was postcards and stuff, but now it's email, and that's acceptable. Cool.
I did it by email.
Is it
There were
possible
definitely
to know who the specific interviewers are, though, in every case?
No. So for some of the schools that I interviewed at, one, they told me very explicitly, do not send thank you notes. Two, some of them you don't have contact info for and they wouldn't give it to you. So I wasn't necessarily able to send thank you notes to all of my interviewers, but if I could, I did.
But you can always send a thank you note to admissions
Yeah.
using the admissions email.
Yep. All right, we are at 8:30 and I do like to start and end on time. We do have some questions from Hayden and Mateo. Okay, so let's, for those that want to drop off, please go for it. If you can stay on to listen to the questions and responses, that would be great. I'm not sure who was first, but was it Mateo?
For assuming when it's interviews on the topic of thank you notes, if you're not initially given the contact, I don't know how that typically works, but say ahead of time, is it ill-advised to ask for their contact afterwards with the thought process being just then send them a thank you note? Or is it if they haven't already given you their contact, that's usually the sign that they don't want to be contacted with the thank you note?
You can always reach out to admissions and ask for the email of your interviewers. Also, most schools tend to have, like Davidson has like at davidson.edu. Most schools do the same thing. And so you can typically like first last name them. But yeah, no, you can always just kind of go find it and then send them thank you notes for it. But usually like if this school doesn't want you to send thank you notes, like they'll tell you.
Hayden.
Also, it can be, sorry. It can be really subjective because for UNC they said like not to, but then I like really made a connection with a person who went to Davidson, funnily enough, and she was my interviewer. And she gave me her email. So if you feel like you make a connection with someone, like don't be afraid to ask, like, would I be able to reach out to you?
And along the same lines, if you have a panel of multiple interviewers or a combination of faculty and medical students, send individual emails to everybody that you have a contact for.
Yes.
Be extra nice to the med students.
Yep.
Really,
and
be extra nice to the med students.
To the admissions people too, and the admins that are checking you in the process, and everyone might potentially have kind of, it's just a sideways remark. And I know, Mike, you have a great story for that, but
yeah, we depended on our staff assistant to screen our applicants, and if they were rude to her when they thought they were off camera, so to speak, that was a big red flag. Because that's their personality coming out, right? So I'm sure none of you all would ever do that, but be polite and courteous to everyone that you interact with, no matter what their station or where you perceive their station to be. I think that's really, really important. It kind of tells a bit about who you are, and that's what schools want to know. So yeah, be careful about that for sure. I have one quick question, and we're out of time. From the 3 students, did medical students, were they part of all of your interviews, or some of them, or was it variable for you of the 3 recent alums?
I think it really depended on the school and also just like who you got So I know like when I was interviewing for UT Southwestern, like some of the people here now, they were interviewed by med students. I got 2 faculty members. It really just depends.
That's variable.
I had students in every single one of mine. I felt like I was lucky in that sense because I felt it was easier to interact with them. But yeah, or it would be like the one-on-one was always with a medical professional, and then the group would be with students.
Got it.
Yeah, for mine, I was always interviewed, like a real interview by like professors or faculty. But over here at DCG, Dental College Georgia, there's a student admissions committee where like they bring you over for like a group, like a hangout group, quote unquote hangout the night before. So that's kind of like an interview, but not really. But in terms of real interview, I was always interviewed by like either an alum or some faculty.
But what you just said is really important. And I'm sorry, I know we're out of time, but we would do that in residency too. We would always have a night before event. And quite frankly, that's part of the interview. It's unofficial and informal, but our residents would come back and say, this individual, oh no, non-starter, or this person dominated the conversation, never let anybody else talk, or hey, this person's very, very collegial, very collaborative. So it's all, whether they tell you it is or not, it's all still part of the interview.
It's always part of the interview.
Always
Correct.
part of the interview.
All right. Well, with that, since you have, thank you all for joining tonight. Thank you especially to our alumni, Dr. Thomason, Tariq, Maya, and Haley. Thank you for taking the time out of your very busy schedules to join us and share wisdom. And thank you for sharing your emails so that students can contact you directly. With that, we'll conclude tonight's program, but practice with us. We're here and available. Okay. All right. Take
Yes,
care.
we are too. So yes, thank you. Thank you, Aisling. Thank you, Dr. Thompson, Maya, and who else is here? Well, thank you. Tariq, thank you for joining
Bye all.
us.
Thank y'all. It's always a pleasure.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Maya, we're catching up.
Yes, I'm going to jump off then. I don't know if that ends the Zoom.
Yeah, well, Maya has Maya, you've got my, let me.
Yeah,
open
I
the
think
Zoom.
you're a co-host anyway. I think.
Oh yeah,
Okay,
you're a
it's true.
co-host. So
That's
I'm going
right.
to jump
I
off.
am a co-host.
Maya, thank
Yeah.
you so much. That was excellent.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Dr. Mamoon, I hope you're happy with that. Yeah.
Oh, that was perfect.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Good. Okay. All
Okay,
right.
so
Bye
are you
now.
going to stop the recording? I guess I am
Oh,
co-host,
yes.
so I can do
Yep.
that as well.